As a proud supporter of the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center, I've been involved in many collaborative projects, including Rio Bravo, that recently celebrated its 30th anniversary. I've also been part of their teatro, working with Grupo Animo and various other teatristas here at the Guadalupe to create such incredible pieces as When el Cucuy Walks and other wonderful teatro here at the Guadalupe. Also musically, I've been proud with my familia and my father, Jesse Borrego Sr., to be able to perform with my familia at the Tejano Conjunto Festival for many years. So I ask you to be a proud supporter of the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center, either by attending, collaborating with us as a performer, and helping create the culture and the cultura that is the bedrock of the West Side, the cultural zone of San Antonio, and also by donating generously through volunteering and also through any donation you can make here to support the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center. Gracias.
Good evening, buenas tardes. Thank you for joining us one more year in Guadalupethon Giving Tuesday of the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center in San Antonio, Texas. We've been showcasing our programs all day long today, starting from 10 in the morning, and we still have a few more hours to go because that's how much we do here at the Guadalupe. We do a lot, and some people sometimes do tell me that when I see them out on the streets at events. Some people will say, gosh, you all do so much. Well, we really do, because there's lots of material to present our community. There's lots of artists to showcase and lots of different unique forms of art that are Mexican American, Latinx, Chicanx artists can feature, can produce. So, we just have lots to showcase, and we can go very, very deep in lots of different subject areas. So that's why we have so much material, so much so that we can take an entire day to showcase it. And we still have more. An entire day probably doesn't cover everything that we have. So this is the one day of the year that we pause to reflect on our work and bring it back to you, our patrons, our supporters, and ask you to continue supporting our work. We ask you to become a member of the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center, to give your donation. Every little bit helps. Today, on this Giving Tuesday, we know that you are supporting your favorite organizations, and make sure to make the Guadalupe one of those. If you're here, if you're on our Facebook feed, if we're on your feed on Facebook, that means that you value what we do, or if we're on your YouTube feed as well, you have subscribed to us for a reason, or you follow us for a reason, because you know that what we do at the Guadalupe, what all the staff does here, is valuable for our culture, for our people, for our communities, for everything around us. So we ask you to support us today. What I'm going to do right now is talk to you about a special program that we do. I know that all day long we've been showcasing the individual programs that the Guadalupe produces. But we are part of an ecosystem here in San Antonio, in the west side of San Antonio, specifically in El Mero Weso de San Antonio. In 2021, we applied, and Texas Commission on the Arts designated us as an official cultural district. Now, we were a little surprised that we actually got the designation, because usually cultural districts have a very well organized and very well oiled marketing machine. And we're not quite there yet. We don't have that. But what we do have in this 1 mile radius around us is a richness and a depth of grassroots cultural arts organizations. The Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center is at the center of them, and it anchors them, but we have many very long-time and loyal and faithful partners that we work with, like Rinconcito de Esperanza, which is 2 blocks east of us, and they have their campus there. Their main center is on San Pedro Street, but they've had a West Side branch here for already a few decades, a couple of decades, and they've done some really important work here in this neighborhood. And then block south of us, we have SACI, which is a nationally recognized youth arts organization. They have a big after-school arts program in the visual arts, in theater, and media arts. And they have moved here recently, made their home in the west side of San Antonio so that they could expand their building and expand their offerings. They had way more students that wanted to participate in their programs that they were able to accommodate before. So they moved into a big warehouse building that they've been renovating, and we now have that addition to the Cultural Arts District here in San Antonio. Then immediately to the west of us, our next door neighbors, we have Avenida Guadalupe, which is not specifically an arts organization, although they do produce lots of arts and culture events, like the 16 de Septiembre parade here on Guadalupe Street. Also the Cesar Chavez March, they host that and launch that, and then several other cultural programs as well. They operate Plaza Guadalupe, which is an important cultural centerpiece in San Antonio that is a place where many organizations hold their programs and their events. Also, some major historic events have occurred there, like a visit from Pope John Paul back in the 1980s, and then we've had even a presidential campaign launch from Plaza Guadalupe as well. So that is an important area that is managed by Avenida Guadalupe, and that's right next door to us. Also housed in Avenida Guadalupe is American Indians in Texas. They had their headquarters there for a long time. They now got new headquarters away from here, but they still have their branch office and right here, right next to us. So they're right next to us. And then another block or two further west, we have Sananto Cultural Arts. And what they are best known for are all the murals that they have painted all throughout the west side. They're responsible for those murals. They have been doing that for several decades. And those are very important now to the fabric and the visual fabric and the cultural fabric of the west side. So they are housed just a couple of blocks west of us. And then finally north on the corner of Colorado and Buena Vista Streets is the National Association of Latino Arts and Culture, that is NALAC. Now, you would expect an organization like that, which serves all the Latino arts organizations in the entire country, you would expect them to be either in the East Coast or the West Coast, either New York or California. Well, no, that organization is actually here in San Antonio, and not just in San Antonio, but in the west side of San Antonio. That is pretty remarkable that we have that here. And the reason for that is because NALAC was actually born partly out of the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center. Back the legendary director Pedro Rodriguez helped found that organization together with several arts administrators from throughout the country. They recognized the need at the time for a coalition of Latino arts organizations in the country to come together and advocate for our needs. In particular, our funding needs, because of course, culturally specific arts organizations are vastly underserved and underfunded. So they came together in the 1990s, and created NALAC, and it has stayed here ever since. So this area that the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center is based in we're actually in the poorest census tract of San Antonio, the poorest zip code and poorest census tract, but Isn't it interesting that culturally it is also extremely rich, and I would venture to say the most rich, culturally rich census tract in San Antonio. So much so that the state of Texas has officially recognized that and given us that designation as a cultural district. And we decided when we were trying to think of a proper name for the place, we finally came down to, well, you know what? Let's just call it what it is. It's El Mero Weso, like down to the bone, the place where this culture is lived day in, day out, and it continues to be produced with a lot of pride. You probably heard, if you saw any of our theater arts programs, how that culture is being showcased in some of the most recent plays that the Guadalupe is presenting. So this is a living culture that is presented in various art forms, and the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center is the house for that, and it's the center for that. So we can't forget about the value of that to a community. And now, with this subject in mind, I'm going to go into the presentation where we're going to see next, the video that we're going to see next. We were happy to partner with the UT School of Public Health, thanks to the leadership of the Dean, Dr. Ramachandran, who wanted to really partner with the community at the community level and do some kind of program with us. And when he asked, I had just seen a summit put on by the White House and the NEA talking about health, public health, and art. And now they are starting to recognize how public health, the arts affect public health as well, not just indicators of health, bodily health, or even mental health. But now the Surgeon General is recognizing how the health of the soul is an integral part of the human being, not just the body and the mind, but the soul as well. And the arts is what influence the soul. So the art being produced by all these organizations around us really has an effect on the community. It's a way that this underserved, neglected, and oppressed community has found a way to live and to thrive amidst the difficulties. So this is one of the things that keeps us alive and keeps us going. So we are just now really starting to wrap our mind around that and understand what that means and showcase it a little more. So with the help of the School of Public Health, we did a program where we brought together all the arts organizations around us, and we each talked about our programs and what we do in our communities and how that affects our patrons, our artists, and everybody who is around us in our ecosystem. So I'm going to leave this video with you so you can watch it tonight, but of course remind you, when you're watching this, remind you to contribute to our organizations. There's the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center, but also all the organizations that you're going to hear from in this video. We ask you to contribute to your favorite top ones, or take turns contributing every year. Give a little bit to each one if you can, but do contribute something. Remember to contribute something in this end of year giving season. So I'm going to leave you with this, leave you with a discussion of Art is Public Health, Arte y Cultura en el Mero Weso. In case you don't know, you are sitting in an official cultural district zone that was designated by Texas Commission on the Arts in 2021. And we are one of the few Mexican-American cultural districts in the whole state of Texas. I believe there's only 2 in the state of Texas, and the other one is Zona Cultural, just a couple of miles away from here. So they're both here in San Antonio. But this cultural district in particular, was born naturally, organically, out of the need of activists to serve their communities, right? Their Mexican-American communities. And this area, I think one of the very rich assets of this neighborhood and this area are all these cultural organizations that have sprouted here. And these cultural organizations, some of them have decades of experience, some of them have national recognition, and some of them serve nationally. And you'll hear all about it right now. Again, this came out of a need to serve our communities, not just economically, not to entertain, but to serve at many different levels and aspects of daily lives and functioning. So that's what we're going to do today. We're lucky to have all these arts and cultural and historic organizations here, and you're going to hear from each and every one of them. I'm also happy to have a lot of people here from the public health sector. I think there's a lot of you here that perhaps are hearing about us for the first time. I'd like to know if you just raise your hand if you're like in the public health sector, working in the public health sector employed. Great, awesome, wonderful. How many of you here are part of the arts organizations or cultural or historic organizations? Just raise your hand. And then there's some academic and community members that are here in different aspects of serving the community. So thank you all for coming. We'll get the program started because we have a lot of people to hear from. The folks organizing today or helping us get this program together today are, I'll introduce the first one, that is Dr. Vasan Ramachandran, who is the Dean of UT School of Public Health, San Antonio, making sure I get that right. So please welcome Dr. Ramachandran.
Thank you, Christina. Councilwoman Castillo, friends, it's such an honor and a privilege to be over here, to feel the warmth and the energy in this room. We are a new school of public health, and we call ourselves the People's School for a reason, because we belong to each one of you. Our goal is to listen, including today, learn from you, to be able to recruit students, enroll them from within San Antonio, from within Bexar County, to train them locally, including working with you all, and to place them locally. And the reason we do this is because I'm by training a physician, and they taught me to diagnose disease and to treat disease. But over a time, it became clear to me that there's also illness, there's also healing, there's also well-being, and that has got nothing to do with physical ailments or disease. And that's where public health meets healthcare, where we need to change the way we approach healthcare and public health. And it begins by learning from the people. And that begins by listening, understanding, and speaking less. So I'm going to stop here and invite my colleague who introduced me to this warm and beautiful place. Thank you for letting me into your homes. What an honor and a privilege to be here. Glenn.
Well, thank you so much, Vasan. My name is Glenn Martinez. I'm the Dean of the College of Liberal and Fine Arts at UT San Antonio, and just want to welcome everyone to this event, our colleagues, both at UTSA and at our sister institutions across the city. We're just delighted to have you here. This event is sort of conceived as Arte y Cultura, as public health, and is public health. I remember when I was in public health school about a decade ago or more, there was a campaign that was put together called This is Public Health, and there were these stickers, and kids would go around and put stickers on things and describe why it was public health. I really think after, my work over the past 10 years in humanities, in arts, in public health, what I found is that there are some things that are public health that you can't put a sticker on. And one of those things is relationships, friendships, bonds of solidarity, coalitionality, sharing. And that's why I'm so happy for this event, because this event represents that coalitionality, that sharing, that friendship, that love that exists between various institutions and various people. And that's what I hope you'll get a sense of throughout today's program, is that the power of those human relationships and how those are central to any view of the health of population. So thank you very much, and thank you all for being here.
And I do want to thank Dr. Glenn Martinez for connecting us with Dr. Ramachandran. He's the one that connected us all together. And the College of Liberal and Fine Arts has been very supportive of UTSA, is being very supportive of the Guadalupe and the west side of San Antonio, everything happening here. Okay, earlier I was scanning the room and I missed her, but I see that we are happy to have as well our councilwoman from District 5, Councilwoman Terry Castillo, who is here with us today. So thank you. Please come over, Councilwoman. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, it's really exciting to be here with UT's School of Public Health. It's really exciting to now have this in the city of San Antonio, and I'm excited for a number of reasons, right? Not just because this event is taking place in my neighborhood, right? I'm a generational resident of this neighborhood, live a block away, but because looking at the agenda and seeing the presentation on refusing to forget the past, right? Because when we talk about public health and health disparities, particularly here in San Antonio, many of these decisions and how we have become an impoverished neighborhood is the result of brokers, right, and actors facilitating conversations and policy. But when you ground yourself in history, right, you have an opportunity to learn on how we can recalibrate and do better. So just excited to be here with you all, and I want to thank everyone involved, and very much looking forward to the presentation. So thank you. Thank you.
Okay, next I'd like to just share quickly that there is a community-wide effort going on to help to revitalize the economy of the west side of San Antonio without the effects of gentrification. That is a coalition that has come together called Estar West, and they have been working together for over a year, initially funded by the Aspen Institute. There's several of us here in this room that are part of this coalition, and this effort is being coordinated and led by Secretary Henry Cisneros. He couldn't be here today, but he does recognize how public health is a very important component of the development of the area. So he did leave us just a recorded message that we're going to listen to briefly.
Welcome to this groundbreaking event, a luncheon and a panel discussion incorporating the major cultural and arts organizations of San Antonio's West Side. This is a pioneering event in the sense that we're going to be discussing subjects that are really, many people don't think go together. But it's very clear that for us to make advances in the economic life of our community, incomes and wages, issues related to education, K through 12 and higher education, the range of things that we think of automatically when we think of progress, it's critical that we incorporate the realities of health. And to see the connection between matters of culture and arts and health That's breakthrough thinking, and I'm so happy and so proud that you're taking up this discussion right here in our West Side. Officials across the country, including as high as the Surgeon General of the United States, are increasingly discussing health not just as a matter of physical health and, more recently, matter of mental health, but increasingly talking about the role of that which we consider the transcendental, the soul, our social being, and health. When you think about it, it's so obvious and so real that people have to be strong in every respect, and understanding their culture, communicated by the arts, is profound and relevant and real. So congratulations for gathering in this way. You'll be all part of an important discussion in this panel, and hopefully share new ideas, get thoughts about how your own organizations can advance the cause, and most importantly, raise the idea with the residents of the West Side. Much of our community has been left behind by the progress that other parts of San Antonio are enjoying. So it's totally appropriate that this conversation would occur here. But more importantly than that, we understand that those connections of culture, the arts, body, mental health, and the soul, perhaps in ways that other parts of our community don't. So it's totally appropriate that the conversation begin here, and that we not only help our own community, but we serve as people who can convey these important ideas on a broader basis across the city and hopefully beyond. Gracias, felicidades, and buena suerte.
Okay, great. Now, moving right along in our program. We are happy that we have currently in this, we call this the Progreso Community Gallery. And in case you're not familiar with the west side of San Antonio, you'll notice that in this like this square mile here, or mile and a half, all the buildings are named either Guadalupe or Progreso. Okay, so this is the Progreso Community Gallery because this used to be the Progreso Pharmacy, this entire building here. So this is our Progreso Community Gallery, and we have rotating exhibits. The current exhibit that we have right now is called Refusing to Forget. This is a historical exhibit put together by a group of professors, of Chicano history professors and Chicano professors from across the state. We are lucky to have somebody who's one of these professors that is very involved with this exhibit here in our backyard at Our Lady of the Lake University. And to tell us just a little more about this exhibit we have Dr. Christopher Carmona from Our Lady of the Lake, who's going to tell us about it. Please welcome Dr. Carmona.
Thank you, guys. So, actually, as Christina said, I'm Christopher Carmona. I'm a member of Refusing to Forget. This exhibit that you guys see here is an exhibit that highlights a particular part in history that most people don't know about, and had a huge influence on the history of Texas, the US, and the world. So this exhibit looks at a specific time frame between 1910 and 1920, where we have the massacre of thousands of Mexican Americans in the name of American progress. All right. To kind of give you a background of what this whole exhibit does, and to kind of put into context as to what we're all talking about here today. So I knew about this history. It's not in your history books. From my grandfather. My grandfather lived during this time, and he told us, and I grew up hearing the stories of the rinches, right? If you're not familiar with what the rinches are, that's the term that the community referred to the Texas Rangers. My grandfather never referred to them as los rinches. He always referred to them as los pinches rinches. it was my dad. They called him Los Rinches. But you can understand what was the impact that had on a community in South Texas. And we're talking about primarily along the border region, where we have, for about 300 years, lands that were considered undesirable by both Spain, Mexico, and the US for many, many years. And these lands were basically run by 5 Mexican families, actually 5 Mexican women, who ran these communities for 300 years. They were ranching communities. And for a long time, ranching was a very profitable business. We're talking about a multi-million-dollar business that this area was comprised of for a very long time. What ends up happening, though, is at the end of the 19th century, we have a shift in the U.S. economy, right? And the shift goes primarily from an agrarian nation to an industrialized nation. And so when this happens, we have the mass production of agriculture being the #1 resource of the U.S. during that time. And so they're looking for places to create massive amounts of mass-producing farms. And so this is where they centered on looking at South Texas. And South Texas at this time was primarily ranch land. If you go start driving south of here, it's all still primarily ranch land, right? But when you get to around where the Rio Grande Valley is, which is where most of this violence took place, not all of it, but most of it was centered on 2 major counties, which was Hidalgo County and Cameron County. And these 2 counties in particular held the vast amount of wealth. And Christina, you're a Bayi family, a member of the Bayis, so you're very much, I'm a member of the Cavazos family. So our families are directly tied to what happened down there. Our families were dispossessed of their lands, their monies, and a lot of us were murdered during this whole time. We're talking by the Texas Rangers. Texas Rangers were just actors. The main people behind them were the state of Texas, as well as American corporations, such as the Rio Grande Land and Irrigation Company. So these are some of the things you have to kind of know. They use the Texas Rangers to basically utilize terroristic tactics to get the lands from these people, because they own these lands for 300 years and they're not willing to sell. And so they use these tactics to do it. So over the course of 10 years, they systematically did this, right? And so we have a lot of people. And, my great-grandfather, during this time, had to take my family into Mexico in the middle of the Mexican Revolution because it was too dangerous to be here. So if you look at my family history, you see people born American. My grandfather's born in Mexico, and then you see, like, why is there this gap, right? What happened? Well, you had to take them in there, and they had to, and so there's a whole history here that what happened. Like, if you look at the history of the Rio Grande Valley, and when most of these cities started, you're going to look at the late teens, 19-teens, and it's like, well, what happened before then, right? They don't really tell you what happened before then because it's a massive amount of murder and lands that's occurred that's not going to be in your textbooks, right? But this was an important thing because this whole history brings in the militarization of the border. Because we look at 1915, which is behind me, which is considered the bloodiest year in this whole time, create something called the Plan de San Diego, which is the Mexican-American response to the state of Texas not protecting them from the actions of the Texas Rangers, so they started a rebellion, right? They call them bandits. And so this starts here, and then we have the military moving in, and then this is where Jovita Edad comes in, if you're familiar with Jovita. And her encounter with the Texas Rangers in front of her press, where she stands up as they were ordered to destroy her presses by the U.S. president at the time, Woodrow Wilson, right? And she stood and she stopped them from destroying her. It becomes kind of this huge moment in this era. But she continued to cover the atrocities. So this whole thing kind of brings it all together to understand what happened. It kind of all ended and culminated in the 1919 hearings on the Texas activities of the Texas Rangers by J.T. Canales, who's photos over there under 19. He was the only Mexican American legislator in the Texas legislature at the time, and he brought this hearings about the activities of the Texas Rangers. And because of those hearings, you have over 200 people testifying to the atrocities, which ended up reducing the Texas Ranger force, basically dispersing them. And then, of course, in 1935, they get reformed under the Department of Public Safety. But as they were dispersed because of the testimonies of people who came forward. So a lot of this history is lost to most people, right? And why this is important is because it brings in an international conflict, it brings in all these things, and it talks about what is usually referred to as the last colonization of the U.S. mainland. The last takings of these land grant families, dispossessing of their lands. But it's my personal history. And it's a personal history of a lot of people. Because a lot of people fled, right, the Rio Grande Valley to here, to San Antonio. And a lot of people carry with them the traumas of these events. So part of the work that I've done dealing with is looking at intergenerational trauma. And so intergenerational trauma is a term that's referred to in psychology as how these traumas are passed down from generation to generation. Well, about 15 years ago, there's actually studies that were done and practices where they looked at the DNA structures and actually there's genetic markers that are called epigenetics, which carry your traumatic, basically these genetic memories from generation to generation with you. They're encoded in your DNA. And so these things get passed down generation to generation. And what happens is when you cut people off from these histories, it starts to create psychological disorders, right? That people are not aware that this is happening. This is about not understanding your own past, right? And so this was started as looking actually in Native Americans, indigenous peoples. This is the practice started in the 70s and 80s. And it took years for the science to catch up to what they were been doing for years. And realizing that not understanding your past, not being connected to your history has this kind of effects, right? Leading causes of different things like alcoholism, drug abuse, suicide, depression, anxiety. And so these techniques are starting to be used, and one of the major techniques that's used is the arts. Because the arts is the one thing that we have that we transmit our stories through. They always have been. During this time, this is they consider the kind of revolution of the corrido. And during this time, during the matanzas, when you had basically an explosion of corridos being written, telling our histories about what happened to people during these times. And those corridos, are cataloged by Americo Paredes and others. But it was really Americo Paredes, who's from Brownsville, who understood the importance of these, right? And he's one of the most famous books with his pistol in his hand is this kind of a oral history of these corridos and Gregorio Cortez. But, for my own person, I'm a writer and a poet, so I put this stuff into my own work, right? To preserve these histories through fiction. Because like it or not, most people get their history through movies and television and things of this nature. They're not going to read our academic books. But they will read novels, especially kids. So I'm going to kind of end it on why this is important in a lot of different ways. So I was doing a presentation in a high school in Brownsville, and at the end of it, there was this kid who came up to me, and he asked me if I had ever heard of somebody named Anoseta Pazania. Anoseta Pazania was a revolutionary during this time. He's kind of known for leading part of the Plan de San Diego to fighting against Texas Rangers and these things. And I said, so he asked me if I knew who he was, and I said, yes, I know who he was. He says, that was my great-grandfather. And so Anoseta Pazania was also a landowner. And he lost everything, which is why he turned to becoming a revolutionary. So he says, since that happened, because these were educated, wealthy families, I'm the first person to be going to college since his great-grandfather. And then basically telling these stories for him has a very deep, real connection, because we're still connected to this. It didn't happen that long ago. When we have somebody's great-grandchild still recovering from the loss of what happened there, right? So we talk about the real connections to why this history, it's still here. We're not, I mean, I'm only 2 generations, right, from this. He's 3 generations, right? So this is the importance of why understanding our history is why we should know about this and what the arts do, like keeping these going and having their stories told is a healing process. Thank you, guys.